Our story takes place a long time ago, in the part of the mighty Austrian Empire that we call Slovenia today. In 1508, baby Primož was born in the village of Rašica. The Trubar family worked for the most important ruler in Slovene lands, the Count of Turyak Castle. Primož's father, Miha, was a skilled miller and an expert carpenter. He kept the key for the local church building and collected taxes and fees people paid to use the road nearby. The Count of Turyak offered to pay for Primož to go to school in Rijeka in what we call Croatia today, where he could study to be a Catholic priest. After studying for 1 year in Rijeka, Primož went to school in Salzburg, Austria. And next, he came to Trieste, where he met Bishop Bonomo. Bonomo was Primož's role model, teacher, friend, his second father. From him, Primož learned foreign languages. Primož knew his own Slovene language perfectly. At that time, the Catholic Church taught things that went against what the Bible says. Some wanted the Catholic Church to return to the truth of the Bible, because God's truth tells us the best way to live. And the movement was called the Reformation. One pioneer was Martin Luther, a priest who saw the church living contrary to God's instructions in the Bible. Luther and others wanted to correct that. These reformers taught that the Bible did not say people can pay money to the church so God would forgive their sins, nor did it say priests may not get married. They were against having the Catholic Mass in Latin, a language few understood. They wanted the church to encourage people to read the Bible in their own languages and discover its truth for themselves. Bishop Bonomo agreed with these changes, and he often hosted guests in Trieste who thought like the reformers, people who were later called Protestants. So, young Primož began to appreciate Protestant biblical ideas. Because there was no university in Trieste, Primož studied in Vienna, Austria. In 1529, when he hadn't even finished half his education, the Turks attacked Vienna. They had been invading Europe for 120 years, destroying villages and towns. A few years earlier, they burned down Rašica, Primož's village. So the university closed its doors. All of the students, including Primož, fled before the Turks could completely surround the city. But the Turks weren't the only danger in Europe in the 1500s. The Black Plague destroyed whole villages and towns, killing all the inhabitants. So Primož was forced to cut short his formal education. He was ordained as a Catholic priest. His first parish was in Lashko, where he taught the simple, clear faith found in the Bible. After 6 years, Bonomo encouraged Primož to move from Lashko to the big city of Ljubljana, which today is the capital of Slovenia. At that time, around 4,000 people lived safely inside the city walls. Primož loved to bring new life to churches in need of the Bible's truth, to free people from their superstitions. But the regional governor didn't like his teaching, and Primož almost landed in prison. He quietly got away and went back to Trieste. Soon, the upper class of Ljubljana had become Protestants, and Primož safely returned to Ljubljana. Bishop Kacianer of Ljubljana, with Bishop Bonomo, appointed Primož to a high position in the Ljubljana Cathedral, the most important position he would hold as a Catholic priest. A year later, Bishop Kacianer died. He left his precious library of books to Primož. This library was a huge, rare treasure. 3 years later, Bonomo also died. Primož lost his greatest allies, 2 men of influence who had welcomed the coming changes of the Protestant reforms. The next bishop of Ljubljana, Urban Textor, was against the Reformation, and so was the next bishop of Trieste. This counter-reformation meant tough times for Primož and his ideas for change. Protestants were kicked out of the Catholic Church and began to flee. Trubar fled to Germany. He left the Catholic Church forever. It would take Primož around 17 days to cross the Alps to Germany. He may have traveled by horse cart. His first refuge was Nuremberg. He had no money, and the authorities had taken away his job and everything he owned back in Slovenia, including his precious library. His new friends in Germany found him a great place to work. He took the job of assistant pastor in the hospital church of Rothenburg. There he began to fulfill his personal mission for the Slovene nation. He had a roof over his head and a small paycheck, enough to live on. And he was safe from the Turks, and the Black Plague, and from persecution. Here he would study and teach the pure, simple faith of the Bible. He began to write the first books in the Slovene language. When people can read God's truth in their own language, they can seek God and follow Him. They become part of God's family, and when they die, God welcomes them. Protestants translated the Bible into various European languages. Their work became the seeds of the written languages of many nations today. Primož was now 40 years old, and he became even happier in Rothenburg. Since he was now no longer a Catholic priest, he could get married. He married Barbara Sitar from Slovenia, and together they had 4 children. In 1550, their first son was born, Primož Jr., and that same year the first 2 Slovene books were printed, the Catechism and the ABCs. In the Catechism, Primož used simple words to teach the Bible's basic truths. He added songs to help people remember these important truths. The ABCs book was created to go with the Catechism, a book that taught people how to read. The first 2 Slovene books were printed in Old Gothic script. Later, a friend convinced Primož that Latin letters were better. As you can see, Latin letters are the better choice, and from that point on, Slovene books were printed with Latin letters, which Slovenes still use today. After serving in Rothenburg for 4 years, Primož was invited to be the preacher in Kempten, Germany. Here he taught and wrote a lot. He began to translate the entire New Testament. He met many important people from across Europe. One of those people was Baron Ivan Ugnad, the regional governor of what is north-central Slovenia today. With Trubar, he co-founded the world's first Bible Society in Urach. Count Ugnad was the Bible Society's owner and sponsor. Primož was the director and head translator. As co-workers and translators, they chose 2 Croatian priests, Konzul and Dalmatin. In the next 3 years, these men published more than 30 books in 4 languages, Slovene, Croatian, Serbian, and Italian, and in 3 different alphabets, Galgolithic, Cyrillic, and Latin. Meanwhile, in Slovenia, the Slovene Protestant Church was being founded. Protestants decided to invite Primož back as their first preacher and leader. Even in exile in Germany, Trubar loved his people so much that he set aside his career and moved back to Slovenia with his big family. He might have been better known today as one of the most important figures in Europe if he hadn't put the needs of the Slovenes ahead of his own. He became the head of the Slovene Protestant Church, named the Church of God of the Slovene language. For 3 years he preached and led the Slovene church from Ljubljana. To help organize this new church, he wrote the Church Order. In this book, Trubar wrote the basics of the Christian faith, how the Slovene church should be organized, how it is essential to educate and ordain preachers and pastors, and how to run a worship service. He also wrote a plan for the education of all children. He wrote that every village and town should have a teacher to teach reading and writing to boys, and even to girls. Imagine that. Up to that point, girls would never have had a chance to go to school. Trubar and others began to start schools for all children. In Ljubljana, they founded a higher level of school like our occupational high schools today. It had 5 grades and helped Slovene students prepare for university. But this newest Slovene book, the Church Order, made Austrian Archduke Karl II angry. He accused Trubar of rebellion against his authority. Karl commanded the burning of all copies of the church order, and he commanded that Trubar be deported. Not again. And it wasn't only Primož who had to flee. Ultimately, all Protestants had to leave. Toward the end of the 1500s, those who opposed the changes of the Reformation, with the permission of Karl II, organized a strong counter-Reformation movement to undo what the Reformers had done. The Catholic Church expelled Protestant preachers, shut down the schools, closed the Protestant churches, burned books, and by doing so, stopped the advancement of Slovene culture for centuries. The Protestants remained only in northeast Slovenia, since that region was controlled by Hungarian rulers who were more open to Protestants. The Trubar family fled once again to Germany. The family now included Primož, his wife Barbara, and their 3 children, Primož Jr., Magdalena, and his youngest, Felician. Their other son, Christian, had died very young. Traveling with them was young student Yuri Dalmatin, who became the first translator of the entire Bible into Slovene. The German church appointed Primož as the assistant pastor in the small town of Laufen, which in that time lay between Catholic and Protestant regions. They needed someone who was strong enough in his faith to hold the Protestant border and at the same time preserve good relations with Catholic neighbors. Trubar was the right guy for that task. Soon after their return to Germany, Barbara died. Primož was alone with 3 children, exiled from his homeland. He didn't write a lot. He was far from places he could print books. Primož was in a difficult situation. But he was a fighter. His living faith in God always pushed him on, even in moments when he faced huge problems. Soon he exchanged jobs with a young preacher in Derendingen, a small settlement next to the university town of Tübingen. Tübingen became one of the most important places in Trubar's life. Many of his books were printed here. Here, Trubar arranged for scholarships for young Slovenes to come and study. There were many like-minded people in Tübingen who stood with Trubar. In Derendingen, he once again began to write. He even wrote specially for children in ways they could understand. He wrote songs as well. He believed that people would remember the Bible's message if it was put to music. He got married once again, but sadly both his second wife, Anastasia, and their daughter died. But he kept going. He eventually married a 3rd time and kept writing even to the end of his life, dying at a very old age. Once the Slovene language was thought too crude and barbaric for reading or writing. But because of Primož Trubar, it now had its own grammar, poetry, and literature. This beautiful language could stand alongside the great languages of Europe, where it still stands today.